Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Boyce, just coming to you with some Silver League sexiness out of the map Belshire Vestige. Spawning up here in the top of the left-hand corner, we do have GMCP Socca as the red Protoss, and down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we have his opponent Rastatoto as the blue Terran, and I'm pretty sure this is a European game because it said Terranair in it. Terraner. I don't know actually how to pronounce that name. I'm just gonna say Terran because it's like weird. It's written poorly. And then Protoss is the exact same, and I'm pretty sure Zerg is the exact same. So I don't know why they had to add an ER to the end of Terran when they translated it to the European languages. But it was strange, and I thought it was strange. And no matter how much like this player makes me think of of one of the characters from Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm very sad that he's not named after him, because like Socca, he's a very iconic character. I mean, the meteor sword and all that junk, you know. He's a really awesome guy in that series. He's like probably one of my favorite characters, you know, other than Aang and everyone else over Socca, because let's be honest, he's a good character, and he would be a good character on like any other series, and he'd probably be one of my favorites in any other series. But that series just has so many good characters. They're all fucking amazing. Anyway, it looks like we are going to have Rastatoto going on for a reasonably, actually an extremely fast block off on the main base here. He does just put that supply depot down and have it like just slightly built so that it doesn't get destroyed instantly. But you know, that's, you know, pretty standard in a TVP. Or really anything where you're a Terran. Because if you can stop your opponent from having scouting information, it's always a nice thing to have. It's just, you know, you never want your opponent to actually know what's going on. It looks like Socca is, interestingly enough, not going for any sort of chrono boost on the main base, and instead going for 2 gateways. Which is a weird strategy. Usually you'll see players actually build cybernetics cores, because cybernetics cores are the things that you need to make anything other than zealots and probes as a Protoss player. Like, there's literally, like, you can't do anything until you have the cybernetics base. It's like the spawning pool of the Protoss race. It's kind of crazy how much everything is based off of those cybernetics cores. But in the meantime, we have Rastatoto not going for anything too crazy or too insane. There, a little bit of a poor micro on that SCV, trying to get it back inside the wall and just not managing it, but that's perfectly fine. It looks like we do finally have the cybernetics core coming up. But again, the double gateway, very weird. Because it's extremely difficult to put on pressure with just zealots as a Protoss player, and by extremely difficult, I mean like freaking impossible, as in you are never going to actually put on pressure with just zealots as a Protoss player against a Terran, maybe against a Zerg, but even then it's a little bit strange because zealots are still pretty easy to micro against and pretty easy to kill if you have a fair amount of Zerglings. They're pretty easy to surround. They're not actually all too cost efficient until you get that plus one armor or +1 weapons on them. Man, I cannot say the right thing at all today. And speaking of that, you guys should go and check out me and Fear Dragon casting the URTL. We did one last night at 9 p.m. It is up on twitch.tv/URgaming. It's in the VOD section. It's very good. It's the O Gaming versus Freaks Clan series. It's about 2 hours long because it went all 7 games. It was a really, really awesome series. And that was a little bit of a spoiler, but you know, screw you. You didn't watch it live. Next time, watch it live. 9 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or at least that's what I think it's going to be. I don't think they're going to move the schedule around too much on us. And also, tomorrow, Thursday, there is going to be another series that we're going to be doing. I do believe that's going to be Team Killing Spree versus EXE Ghost Squad, which is, of course, the EXE Academy, which is like their minor leagues team. It's like their AA team. It's kind of like the Paw Sox, if anyone actually lives in Massachusetts up here with me. It's like the Paw Sox to the Red Sox. I'm pretty sure. It's like their little training academy, you know, for Platinums and above. And it's a pretty cool program that you guys should probably go check out. It's really awesome. A lot of teams are actually doing it now, and it's pretty great. It looks like we are going to have a missile turret coming down from Rastatoto. He really does not want to risk running into any sort of issue with the Stargate play, which is pretty. I mean, that's a pretty good decision because you're looking at a Protoss play and you're like, you don't have an expansion down yet. That's weird. Now, of course, Socca is going for something extremely strange in that he's not actually getting any tech up past the cybernetics core. He has a lot of gas still stockpiling up, which is pretty much why it's so strange that he's not actually going for any sort of any level of tech past test the 7x core, because honestly, the 7x core, it's good. It allows you to get, you know, the mothership and the stalkers and the zealots and the sentries, but it's not really the most useful thing in the world, because there's not a whole lot of heavy hitting units though. Those are like the beef in your armies, and then like the high note sauces you have to get from more advanced tech structures. It looks like we are going to have the factory pumping out widow mines at this point. Interestingly enough, he decided to opt for a tech lab onto that, which is a little bit strange. Usually if you're going to produce widow mines, unless you're going for tunneling claws, and drilling claws are good, but you need an armory, and they're not too useful, but you know, they're pretty good on their own. But you really need a reactor to get enough of them out to be useful, because I mean, he has one widow mine which will blow up and kill like one Protoss unit. If you really want to do damage with the widow mines, you need at least 3, and then you kind of just need your opponent to lose a lot of his sanity and just run all of his units right into your widow mine. It looks like we are going to have our Protoss player at this point kind of setting up a little bit of attack here. He's planning on it. This is a very small force still. You know, the macro, not the strongest it could be. I mean, it's not awful, but at the same time, not the greatest. The build order could still use quite a bit of refinement at this point, especially because he's going for 2 very different strategies. He has both the Stargate and the robotics facility on the way. Now, of course, with this scan, it's going to be okay because, you know, the Terran player only scanned the cybernetics core. However, still, it's just a little strange to see that happening. And it looks like here we are going to have the Protoss forces just running on by that army and running right into the Terran Bioforce. And the Terran Bioforce is larger than the Protoss force, so the Protoss is kind of just going to have to run away because he does not actually have any level of proxy pylon to fight, or to, you know, reinforce and help him continue this fight. We have actually a complete stop on production from Socca, which isn't exactly what you want. You always want something researching or something building in some form. I guess with the Nexus on the way and him being Protoss, so, you know, his warp-ins happen at intervals instead of constantly, like the production of the other races. I guess I can kind of see it, but it's a little sketchy to not actually have anything in production at all for an extended period of time, especially when you could be producing the extremely useful observer or a robotics bay. And it looks like we are going to see Socca going for a more robotics-heavy play, as he does have 2 robotics facilities on the way, along with the Robo Bay. So I could see a lot of Colossus coming out from our Protoss player at this point. However, if he really wants to ramp into some heavy Colossus production, he is going to need to take this 3rd base in just a little while. You know, you really need to have a lot of economy to actually manage to pull that off well. Now, of course, he's still in a good position because Rastatoto really hasn't taken an expansion yet, and by that I mean he has not taken an expansion yet. So our Protoss player is still going to be ahead economically for quite a while here, as this command center needs to finish up, and then it needs to turn into an orbital command, and then it needs to lift up and actually float down to the natural, and that takes forever. It looks like we are going to have an Oracle coming out from our Protoss player, and Oracles are interesting units in the PvT matchup because they either do a lot of damage or they do no damage at all. And I'm thinking that this Oracle could start leaning towards the no damage at all, purely because of the fact that this army is so heavily based on Marines, and this army also has Stim upgraded, and you also have the missile turrets already sitting in the middle line for a Terran player. I think that we could see this Oracle be very, very easily denied by our Terran player as it moves into actually, you know, have this attack. And one Oracle, although it's scary, isn't the scariest thing in the world. Its pulse beams will last for quite a while unless he has to like deactivate and reactivate it. That really drains a crap ton of energy. It's like 25, it's basically 22 seconds of pulsar beam activation to turn it off and turn it back on again. I think that's a little bit of an overestimate. I think it's actually like 18 seconds, but it's super expensive to have to turn it back off and back on again, because you have to spend 25 energy on the reactivation of it. It looks like we are going to have the Oracle coming in here, and it's going to be doing as much damage as possible, which is not going to be that much damage. I think it actually only got 1 SCV, which is not a lot of damage at all. Now, of course, forcing the entire pull-off to the natural is actually a pretty good strategy. I mean, that does okay, because that's a lot of money lost in literally just transferring SCVs. That was probably like another 2-ish SCVs in literally just the cost of time it took for him to transfer his SCVs, because this is a long walk. This is at least 1 like carriage for all of the SCVs that were in that group, and with 20-ish SCVs transferring, that adds up to about 100, which is approximately 2 SCVs, which is it's a pretty good hit to the economy. That was, again, I wouldn't really call that Oracle worth it because it didn't do any permanent damage. However, it wasn't bad. It wasn't the worst that could have happened. It looks like we are going to have both of our players playing extremely carefully, which in the Silver League, I guess, is kind of okay. I mean, a lot of players are known for just randomly going like, oh, it's 13 minutes into the game. Now would be a good time for Cloaked Banshees, because I bet he doesn't have anything to fight it off, because most of the time, a lot of players won't. Now, of course, with the current way that the Protoss race is measuring up to the other two, they have a crap ton of detection. Even without the detection on the mothership core, like it was in beta, which was absolutely absurd, you still have the detection on the oracles, you have the detection from the observers, you just have a ton of detection that you'll be able to get and spread around on your army. And it's really quite effective. It looks like as far as upgrades go, we are going to have our Terran player being quite far ahead in that front. He does have +1/+1 on the infantry, along with +1 attacks coming out onto the tanks at this point, versus, you know, the no upgrades. Although he does have double forge, so he's preparing for those upgrades. He's getting ready to drop those upgrades down. He just hasn't started it yet. This is kind of the point where I would suggest our Protoss player to start thinking about getting a third Nexus, because you really do want to be ahead. And as soon as you get those Colossi, especially if you're playing against a player that's going for this very old school style of mech siege tanks along with small bio balls, it can be pretty easy to keep a third base. Belshir Vestige, I don't know why I always call it Vestige, but you know, it's a Vestige. Belshir Vestige is kind of an awkward map because the distances between the natural and the third isn't that far for dropships. However, if you can fly into your opponent's base with an observer, which he no longer can because of the Raven that's just kind of floating there, but if he had flown through and seen that there was a starport with a tech lab on it instead of a reactor, you can kind of go, oh, he's not going to have that many medevacs. And if he even does send drops in and I manage to snipe off medevacs, that's going to go way in my favor, because sniping off those medevacs are going to do a ton of damage to his overall army potency. So that's kind of the point where you can just be like, oh, I can start moving out. I can take a little bit more map control, and I can take those third bases because they're really, really nice. He is taking a third base, but I would call it the wrong one to take. Really, on a lot of these maps, there's a lot of Heart of the Swarm maps that have very awkward positionings for the third base, where you have one that's either actually no, this one's closer. This is like the absolute natural third base when it comes to taking on the Terran player. The only reason you would take this base is if you are Terran, or if you're playing against someone that has less air than you, because what you really want is a situation where your units can traverse between your bases faster than your opponent's units. And right now, with the Terran having medevacs, you know, medevacs are extremely useful in this new expansion, where they can just lift up units and fly into the main base if a drop is going poorly, because of that Ignite Afterburners, which is a very, very useful spell. It allows you to completely kick your medevacs into high gear and absolutely wreck through your opponent. And just kind of, you know, fly right over his army. And there's very, very little that most players will actually do to stop it. It looks like we have a very solid macro game coming out from our Protoss player at this point. He is going to be moving up to 6 Colossi, which is a pretty nice number of Colossi. Rastatoto is going for a pretty good mix of units. He does have a couple of Ghosts currently out with his army. It looks like he's currently sitting at just 2, which isn't the highest number. I mean, he could definitely use some more, but it's pretty good. Interestingly enough, we see him going for a Thor, which I would call a pretty poor decision at this point. Thors are really good at not a lot in the PvT matchup. They're very much more useful in PvZ when you're taking on Mutalisks, and you don't want them to be able to have extremely easy micro. You want to punish them for how heavily they can micro their troops. You want to make them do that kind of magic boxing, which is a little bit awkward to use. It takes a little bit more control than a lot of Zerg players are used to at this level, and it also forces Mutalisks into a position where they're quite easy to snipe for Marines, and they just can't really target fire units down amazingly efficiently. However, we have the move out from Rastatoto happening right now, and he does have more in the terms of army supply, I do believe. Control. Hey, there we go. Yeah, he is 24 ahead in army supply, which is pretty good. That's definitely not bad. And he does manage to take out that base extremely fast, so that's just the pure upgrades happening for our Terran player at this point. Yes, and it looks like we are going to have the siege tanks just sniping away at the Colossus, making it very, very awkward for his Protoss player opponent to take anything. And this is why you can't take that base, because his army was just super out of positioning. And even if he couldn't really save like even if the base was over there and that had happened, he probably wouldn't have been able to save it, but he would have been able to have a favorable engagement, because over here you're giving your opponent high ground when they decide to come and siege down your base, and it just makes it a little bit more awkward for you to try to have an engagement. It looks like at this point we are going to see Colossus on their way, along with scouting marines, just trying to see what they can see, which is not that much, because, you know, there's a lot of Colossus, and they're kind of just roasty-toastying everything. Also, we have +1/+1 just now finishing up for Socca as he gets +1 armor at this point. It looks like we are going to have a couple of Vikings trying to come in here and sneak it out, and we are having a transformation to a mothership. Very interesting. That is a weird decision to have at this point in the game, because the Mothership Core really is a very useful unit. It's a lot like the big Mothership at this point. I mean, maybe it does a little bit less damage, but it's not that much less, and honestly, you don't get the Mothership Core for its spells, and I don't even think the Mothership Core has Vortex anymore, which was the really awesome and really usable thing. So I'm kind of interested, especially because the Mothership Core is actually, or the Mothership is going to come out and not have all too much energy. Plus the fact that you have a player that has detection in his army, that it's going to be difficult for you to snipe because you don't have blink stalkers. Does he have blink stalkers? No, he doesn't have blink stalkers. So that Raven is definitely going to be awkward to snipe. But we're just going to have to see how this engagement decides to play out as soon as this Mothership Core finishes morphing into the Mothership. And whoosh, oh wow, that is actually a really awesome looking animation. And the Mothership Core doesn't have enough energy for anything at this point, but there's just not enough. Wow, there's a lot of Colossi. Wow, there's a lot of Colossi. Oh, I completely misunderstood how many Colossi there were for this army. And even without, the best detection in the world, we saw some improper targeting from the Terran forces, trying to kill off that Mothership Core extremely fast, and it just didn't really work out in any way, shape, or form. And in the end, it was just an absolute clobbering for the Protoss player. Now the Protoss player should be pretty comfortable as far as just moving into this force. There's still a reasonable amount of Terran here, but the Terran is not getting micro properly. There really isn't enough medevacs to actually make this threatening, and there's not a whole lot you can do as far as sniping off these Colossi, because he went for heavy Viking production, but he just didn't actually get a reactor to start with, which is something you really need in this matchup. So that's probably going to be game as we kind of just wait for the good game out of Rastatoto. And Rastatoto's just going to leave because he's BM like that. So anyway, guys, if you want your games commentated, send them on into boisteroussc2@gmail.com. Also, if you want any other boisterous action, head on over to youtube.com/user/boisteroussc2. Don't forget to check out me and Fear Dragon commentating the URTL over at twitch.tv/urgaming this Thursday, and probably every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. But I need to actually see what the schedule is going to come out to be. I think that was the solid schedule, but I'm honestly not sure, so I'm not going to say full-on promises yet. So anyway, guys, this is Boisterous, signing out.